Hello everyone, thank you for sticking around. We are now switching over to the world building section of the stream, and actually that reminds me I should probably change the title. Building a New World. And this is just chatting. Done. Okay, so where do we stand at the moment? Well, the first thing I should probably do is bring up Worldographer so I can show you where we stand with the world at the moment. And in fact, while that is loading, I'm just going to go and ping over on Discord to say we are switching. Don't know why I always capitalize that, it just looks better. Okay, so open recent. Origin 3, but we also want to see Before Disaster. So let's load up the Before Disaster, because this is what we were working on last time. So I know there has been a little bit of a break. So for those of you who are new, this is the continent that we're working on at the moment. This is kind of the equivalent to Europe. And the idea is effectively that there is a city which is right there that blows up. There is a god which basically becomes a little bit too powerful for the other gods, and they basically shank him. And he was the god of this city, and he was basically using them to consume their magic and become more powerful. So he gets shanked, big explosion, all of this gets flooded. So this sea basically embiggens, and the geography of this central region changes pretty dramatically. But in order to do that and to basically determine what the aftermath of this event was, it was required that we knew what it looked like before. And that is what we have been doing. Now, since the last stream, I think I did make a couple of tweaks. I actually went on for another hour after the end of the stream, just changing a couple of things, primarily where the rivers were running. So we've got these rivers up here in the north, running from here through here, and then emptying into this. We've got the river down here, which is kind of part of a circuit which goes around the Great Plain, which is this. And this is important because this river connection becomes in the future really, really vital. And then all of this is basically denoting this is a very low-lying area, and this is the area that gets really, really heavily flooded when the cataclysm comes about. But what happens right now is the big city here trades with people along this coast. There's like city there, city there, city there, city there, city there, and then a city back here. And then there's also various cities along this river. It's kind of like the Norse trade routes through Russia. One of the amazing things about the Vikings is they used to trade with Constantinople via Russia, via the rivers. They're all interconnected. And they used to sail across from the Baltics. They go where St. Petersburg is now, across to Novgorod, then known as Homegard, down to Konongard, now known as Kiev, and Kiev down to what they call Miklagard, Constantinople. And I wanted to have a similar system going on here. So there are cities scattered back here, which they basically use the rivers to traverse, and then they can effectively use that to bypass the Great Plain, which is a little bit more difficult to cross. However, all of this gets filled in. But that's important because these cities out here effectively survive. And that is those are the seeds which spawn the later races, the humans, the elves, the gnomes. Because the precursors are effectively genies, magic gets burned out of them with the intensity of this, and depending on how close to the center of this they were, is determining how much magic they have left as a latent power. So the humans were right near it. The humans are probably the guys like down here. They get all the magic scrubbed out of them. They can't innately cast it anymore. They can still learn to do it eventually. There are still sorcerers and warlocks and stuff like that, but they as a race do not have a latent magical ability. The elves are out here. They still do, because they're just much further away from the center of the explosion. And then you also have the gnomes, who are up here in the mountains. And the mountains effectively act like a shield and protect them from the worst effects of it. But because they are still really close to it, they have to deal with the fallout. And this is why gnomes are resistant to magic, because they had to survive that. So because they're environment was just laced with this magical energy, they got resistant to it. That's why gnomes are resistant to magic. And possibly drow elves. Something I hadn't actually considered. Drow elves are very resistant to magic, so you probably have wood elves and drow elves back here. This is effectively the Feywild. This big forest, so actually that gets flooded, but this forest is effectively the Feywild. And a lot of the magic kind of gets swept over the mountains and then dropped on top of that, which is why the Fey have their magical capabilities. Cool. Now, we do still want to play with the territory outside of this, so I'm still not very happy with the layout. So you can kind of see where I have been tooling around with it, because the lay of the land becomes a lot more homogeneous. So you have like the Great Plain here, you have the waters, you have the big swamp down here. This gets blasted through, by the way, which is part of why this all gets flooded, is this swampy area gets annihilated by a tsunami and then it just fills in from the ocean outside. So that's there as well. Then we have the Dwarven realms over here. The Dwarves are probably around at this point, though maybe in a slightly different form. The Dwarves are probably one of the most ancient races around. And they're in these mountains here. And then we have this desert in the center, which at the middle of the desert is an ancient white dragon. And their lair is basically turned into a glacier, which is why you have a glacier in the middle of the desert. It's just one of those cool things you can do in D&D. But like this territory out here, I want to flatten that out. I want that to become more of a steppe. Need to play a bit more with the north. I don't really know what to do with that yet. I want to play with this a little bit more. Turn that into something else, likewise with the peninsula and then the various islands. I was planning to start working on the different races earlier, but I think I want to continue doing the geography. Because from there we can have a better idea of how everything evolved. So now that we've done with that, I want to head over to World Origin 3, and this is the world as it is now. So the world that you just saw was back when the precursors around. This is how it is now, and you can see that this large area, which used to be like the center of their state, is now ocean. The water goes right up to the Shield Mountains. They blocked the water. Some of the water did smash through, leaving a little mountainous island there. This has all become swampy, and then we had the breakthrough here, and this has now just become part of the main ocean, with more widespread ramifications, of course. Hey, Doomed World, finally caught a world building stream. Yay! Been looking forward to this. Missed last week's. Well, we didn't do world building last week because we were doing Warhammer. So you should now be all caught up. Are the little red spots volcanoes? At the moment, yes, but where exactly those volcanoes are, we might well play with. Like the ones which are kind of out on their own, I don't mind those so much. We'll probably keep them, but I'm trying to keep a fairly realistic tectonic plate movement. So these mountains here being in the same area is because a continental plate is basically being pushed together, and then it buckles and ripples, and that's how the Alps are formed. So this is like the equivalent to the Alps and the Carpathians. Is the dragon ancient during the time of the precursors? Probably not. I would say that dragon was probably a young'un at that point. So it's been around a while. It has seen some stuff. And then the other thing which is of interest is we did do a little bit of work playing on the... I'm just going to close that, and I'm going to close that. Oh, and... that definitely need to close that. Whoops. Need to play on the... trying to remember where I saved it. Where did I save that? Documents. D&D. Promescence, right, yes, because there should be a picture here, which was me playing around in paint, basically, and then drawing out what the dwarves looked like. Here it is. Huzzah! Sometimes this program has trouble loading it. So this is the Dwarven realms. You can see the two mountains. There's the dwarves, and then there's the other dwarves. There's two large realms here. And then the Silk Road. So we've got the Silk Road going out east. That's where a lot of the trade comes from, and we kind of need to work out on exactly what this is importing and exporting. We can work on that, though. And then we also have part of the overseas trade coming into the boat dwarves, because I wanted the dwarves to be at a crossroads for the trade. This is part of the reason why they're so prosperous in this region, and why they're so important, is they control the trade from the east. So trade goes through the desert to the main dwarven homelands. It can go via the boats. So it can come over land, which is more dangerous. It can come by sea, which is probably the most frequent. And then it comes across here, then up, and then disperses amongst the rest. There is probably, in this case, going to be a city like in here, which would be one of the major ports. But there's a city here, which is huge, because that is the crossroads between the Silk Road east, the Silk Road south, and then all the stuff going north. We've got the trolls here and here, which is why you can't go around the sides, because the trolls will just intercept it, which is why they brave the desert. There is a city by the glacier, which kind of just deals with the dragon attacks every now and then. Although that dragon is ancient. It sleeps a lot. Like, we're talking decades, if not centuries at a time. But I just thought that was interesting. This is the kind of detail I want to get to eventually with everything else. But at the moment, we are not quite there. So, what do we want to work on today? One of the other assumptions is the orcs come from something which is effectively like Atlantis. It's a land that sinks. They all take to the ships, and then they sail, and then they land on this archipelago. This will become the orcish homeland. There will probably also be orcs along the coast here. I was thinking goblins might be up here. Maybe they came from a previous wave of maritime greenskin, so there's just the greenskin precursor out here somewhere. That would kind of make sense. And then I was also thinking, I like turtles. We haven't really... D&D doesn't use them very often, and this kind of feels like a turtle-ish type place. So they're one of the main, naval rivals to the maritime orcs. So the orcs are pirates, effectively. Viking goblins. Possibly. That would actually be kind of interesting, that the goblins being raised to be more hardy. Part of the reason that they have a social structure is because they have to survive in clans to survive at all. Interesting. I like that. Then based on the precursor explosion, this over here is probably where the elves are. Probably along this waterway. We do need to add in some rivers, so the rivers would have changed. This map currently has no rivers on it. We need to add those. So that is going to be another big deal. But I think right now I want to play with what are probably the human realms. The humans were probably down here and over here. And I think that in the time frame that we would be using in the main game, this would be the human main realm, because I'm thinking that the hobgoblin attacks when they came in from the east swept through the dwarven realms. The dwarves just shut the doors and let them go round. And then eventually the hobgoblins settled down here. And the hobgoblins now are kind of like the Italian city-states. And then this little area here, they are starting to build a canal so that you don't need to go around the peninsula anymore. So we might have humans down in the peninsula. We might have humans up here. We need to decide where we want halflings. I really have no preconceptions about the halflings whatsoever. Any other races that we are missing out on? Tieflings. I mean, tieflings aren't even necessarily from this world. That'd be kind of interesting if they set up shop around a portal or something. Actually, I kind of like that. Makes sense for the tieflings, doesn't it? There's a portal that leads to somewhere else. Whether it be another part of this world, or whether it be somewhere else. Desert halflings, that's an interesting idea. So usually halflings are more agrarian. I kind of like the idea that the halflings like the breadbasket. So we could put the halflings like in here, which would be pretty wetland, or down here. And the halflings being down here, could even have the halflings being kind of oppressed by the hobgoblins. So you have the halflings and the hobgoblins mixed together in a state. Halflings basically being former slaves. Because how the hell does... This is one of the problems I have with the halflings. What niche do they fill? Like, what are their specialities? How do they survive? Because the Tolkien-esque halflings, their main thing seems to be nobody dislikes them, and mental fortitude, which is why they can resist the effects of the ring far better than most other races. Need less food? I would say, if anything, halflings use more food. Shipbuilders? No, I want the orcs to be maritime. I don't think it really makes sense for halflings to be sailors. Halflings could just be a race that lives among others rather than actually having their own kingdom. Yeah, but we need to have a... If we want to use gaming terms, a spawn point for the halflings. Like, where did they come from? What is their origin? After that point, yeah, they can spread out among all the others. That's fine, but where do they come from? Because it could entirely be the halflings are off map. Because everything that the halflings could be, I'm like, well, humans just do it better. Halfling food producers. Yeah, I am thinking that they'd be the agrarian ones. Just kind of always there. They didn't really come from anywhere. Pull from Tolkien with Gollum's origin, make them river folk, make them traders. I mean, that could actually be one of the things is... Halflings don't have any magic abilities, do they? They just have that natural luck. Grabbing the player's handbook to see what abilities halflings have. I've only ever played one. Human, Dragonborn, Halfling. Lightfoot. Charisma, Stealth, Constitution, Resilience. Nimble, Brave, Lucky. Because I'm trying to think where they fit into our narrative. Like the effects of the Djinn magic explosion. So halflings could well be just... effectively an offshoot of the humans. Halflings are inherently resistant to corrupting magic. Yeah. Stout resilience. Well, that's against poison. They don't actually have anything like that. Hobbits are naturally resistant to corrupting magic. I mean, actually, to be honest, there is nothing stopping us creating our own subrace. Are you planning to do the normal goblin, kobolds, orcs, or savage barbarians? No, absolutely not. Hobgoblins in particular are probably one of the most civilized races around. They're too frickin' organised not to be. They'll be very militaristic, they'll be very regimented, but they're definitely one of the civilized races. One of the playables, quote unquote. So if halflings are resistant to magic, then maybe... halflings are the guys around here. Like, they're very close to the Nexus. They weren't underground like the gnomes. Ah, yes, that actually makes sense. Because they have some blood in common to the gnomes, which is why they're all small. They're effectively the gnomes that wandered out. Because this is the Nexus of Corrupted Magic. Corrupted Magic as a feature exists in this world. It's called Mordius. Actually means death of the god, or god's death, but Mordius is effectively the Latin for that, bastardized of course, but it sounds cool. I actually kind of like that. I like that the halflings would be from here. And then we could turn this into like a low-lying fertile land, and then we can have rivers going in and out of the Fey territories. So even the Fey wouldn't necessarily dislike them. Adapted to jungle. Jungle, we're too far north for that. The temperature of this region is kind of Baltic. We're pretty cold. The warmest would be down here, which is the Turtles. And this is probably, like, the very bottom would be jungle. Maybe. Maybe. But even that, I think, would make sense. I think jungles would be further south. Yeah, I like the idea that the halflings are in here. They're just kind of left alone, because they're just on the fringes. And then from there, because they're in such a maritime area, they could easily have spread to any of the other coastal regions. And also, if we take a look at the world before the disaster, that region's not that... Actually, no, it is pretty badly hit. Yeah, this is here. It's really badly hit. So the halflings we're talking about would have been the ones from in this little section. This is the origin of the halflings. Which is this. Jungle is a very open term for forest. There are even technically jungles in Europe. Really? Where? Halflings are the gnomes that were on the surface when the place blew up. Well, remember, gnomes at that point did not exist. They were still all djinn. It's the centuries that passed since the explosion is what caused them to go from genie to gnome. Precursor to gnome. The Balkans have rainforests. It's almost all rainfall and not about temperature. Hence the name rainforest. Spain. Huh. I mean, Balkans probably would be down here, so yeah, I guess we could have some limited jungles. We'd need to work out exactly the weather patterns to do that. I mean, that might be why this is kind of a rain shadow. Is prevailing Arctic winds blow down through this, pushing the rain around here, pushing it down to here where it drops in this sector as soon as it hit land. That's possible. That's definitely possible. Or water is leached out of this area, pushed upwards, chilled by the water, and then as soon as it hits the... I don't know. I don't know enough about meteorology. I like this being the halflings, though. This is definitely going to be a halfling realm. So... Strongheart halflings would be the ones that are still up here in the hills and the mountains, and then you have the Lightfoots, which would be the ones down here. That makes so much sense. I like it. So I think I'm going to get rid of some of the forests here, because... no, you know what? These northern forests I'll keep, but I really want to flatten this out and make it into kind of swampy Wessex type area, which the halflings have then drained. So this becomes effectively the Low Country. Halflings are Dutch. Which actually I think makes a lot of sense. Like, if we want to have the idea that the halflings are an agrarian people, the Netherlands is one of the most fertile parts of Europe where a bucket load of food is sent from. They would have some nautical experience because there's a lot of water around here. They have the forests to make the ships with. And we could say that this is a dike. Oh, I like that. Yeah, this is a dike. So at one point, this was... Maybe we'll push this out to, like, here. Cut across this. And then they've reclaimed the swamps from here and here. We'll reduce the amount of water and turn it into swamps instead. Combine it with Venice and make them into a trade power in the inner sea. They're a little isolated to be a major trade power. I think they'd be an exporter as opposed to an importer, and they certainly wouldn't be a middleman. Like, the trade nexus would be down here. So maybe if we had, like, a halfling city here, that would be kind of the Venice. And that would make sense. And then it's opposed to the human city over here, so there's a big rivalry between these two. Which would explain why there's halflings throughout the human realms, especially if some of the halflings are actually down here too. No, I think that this should be primarily human. Like, this whole area is human. And then probably also down to here. And then... No, this is... human and halfling mixed. So here again is the question, where are the humans? The humans were the closest to the Nexus when it blew and they lost their magic. So the humans are probably along here, for sure. And probably down here. So this would be human. They'd have goods from the Fey Forest to trade. That's true. Especially if there was a river coming through, say, here. Because if it's on here, did I put that river in? I didn't. But I was playing with a river coming from this lake through here. And then exiting in here, which is then why this is so low. Because effectively the river delta comes through here. Okay, let's play with that. So, using the absolutely awful river drawing stuff, which is done on layers. No, it's not layers, it's in shapes. And then line, because you don't want to use the curve. Preset. So I did add stream. Stream misspelled and then proper stream. So stream is thin, non-navigable. And then you have the main river, which is very navigable. So I think we are going to put a big old river straight through here. Leading down to this. Yeah, I like it. So we're going to go river from there, going into here. Down through this. Spreading out through there, going along here between the mountains. To eventually come into there. We're going to not make that hills. So that's the main river. We'll have tributaries going through all of this from the surrounding mountains where they would feed into that. So this is a big old river. So there would definitely be a major city here. Probably the Halfling capital. And then around here, because this is all lowland, I'm going to get rid of the mountains, I think. I don't want mountains here. It doesn't make sense. Actually, would it? Yes, it would, because these mountains are the tip of this range. Yeah, those mountains have always been there. That's fine. Because that's part of a fault line. Which is why there's mountains there. So I do like the idea that there's a big old swamp. Which the halflings are. So nominally the date here, I'm just going to use Ambernar because it's a really good example for this, but I'm just going to set the date as 1444. I do not intend to make it into an EU4 mod. I do not have the time for that. If someone wants to do it in the future, cool, probably. But 1444 is just a nice date to set things around. And at that point, this dike is complete. So this is not forested. That, whoops, would definitely be flatland. Classic. Actually, you know what? I'm going to turn that into ocean, and we're just going to draw like a road along there. So it's going to be all of that. Get rid of this. Yeah, and then I think it's going to be across here. And then if we go back to features, shapes, line, road. And then there is going to be, rather weirdly, a road that runs through there. I know there's farmland tiles, but I don't want to use farmland for this. I want it to be pretty clear what this is. We want to make that width thinner. Make it a 15. That's the dike. Now let's play with the lie of the land back here to make it look a bit more Dutch. Wall would make more sense. That's not wrong. There you go. Yeah, that makes more sense. So I think what I'm going to do first is we're just going to turn all of this, into water. All of this up to those, flood in back here, up to there, around here, up to here, and all of this. So that used to be inundated. It is now farmland. Let's get rid of some of these woods. I don't want this to be quite so heavily forested. And then I want to have green hills. Green, 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 green hills. On those. And then I'm thinking the land around this is probably the highest. So this is probably a lot of what was reclaimed. And over to here. And in here. And then a little bit on this side too, around those hills. How long before the halflings reclaim the whole lake? I mean, I don't know, but they're trying. And then let's turn this into farmland. Let's turn these stupid deserts into not deserts. Pasture. And then let's turn these woods into farmland, because I just like the idea that those are farms. And we could have some of the less fertile grassland, which is this stuff, back a bit. Yeah, there we go. I do want to start replacing this just generic green with grassland, because that's what it is. And to differentiate the really fertile terrain from the it's alright. Grassland is still very much arable. And then all of this can become grassland back here as well. Replace the deserts. I don't see any reason for this to be deserty. And in fact, I think that that right there would be... marsh. Where's it gone? Not swamp, marsh. This would all be marshland up here. And that bit would actually be swamps, because it's trees. And then, you know what? There is a little grassy hill right there, which the river kind of cut through. And it's on one of those hills that the main city is. Are we going to have any blighted land in this world? Probably not yet. We might add some later if we find reason to add blighted land. Like necromancy gone wrong or something like that. Because this is just the baseline geography. Then on top of this, we'll layer everything else. Alright, let's turn this into grassland, because there's no reason it wouldn't be. Likewise with all of this and this. What the heck is that? Badlands. Yeah. Nope, not Badlands. Green Hills. This area is pretty good, pretty fertile, pretty nice. Grass, 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 grass. There it is. And these mountains, I don't really see any reason you would exist. Let's just turn that into hills. Just have a little line of hills around here. And then we also need to turn these little bits into grass. And all of this. We could have a little bit of a swampy area back here again. Marshy. And then grass. So this area here is probably one of the most fertile areas in the world. More or less. But the Halfling realms in general are still pretty arable. And then this is, yeah, this is the Halflings right here. I like it. That makes a lot of sense to me. Whoops. Got rid of a mountain there I did not want to get rid of. And those hills I want to make a bit wetter. Now, is there any reason for this to be as dry as it is? Not really, no. Actually, this up here should probably be grazing land rather than grassland. It's a little bit darker. It's not quite as good because it's up in the hills. And then we'll have grassland around there. And then this is also grazing. With grassland. Along the middle. Hard to kind of see the difference, but it's there. So this is where the Stout Hearts would be, and then this is where the other ones are, the Blightfoots. Will there be a Shire, one nation of Halflings, or will there be several ones around this area? Probably several. I can definitely see like one nation being formed up in here, kind of shielded by the mountains. They'd be the frontiers type people. Maybe Furbolgs. Then probably one nation centered around this. And then probably one big one, which is kind of the Netherlands bit. Don't know. That's the kind of thing that we will be deciding in the future, because I'd like to semi-simulate that. So this is why I wanted the spawn points. So we can say these are the city-states that survived to this point. What happens to them over time? Who do they fight? Who do they merge in with? Who do they ally themselves to? Why? What's the political situation? Actually, you know what? I think that some of this back here should be fertile too. Let's turn that into farmland. The bits that are here between the rivers, this is also going to be nice. Good stuff. Not rivers, the lakes. Let's get rid of this. Definitely get rid of a bunch of this. Irrigation. Naturally irrigated. Not as good as this bit up here, but it's decent. It's alright. That bit should be grazing. And then grassland back here. Getting rid of all the weird-ass deserts that this program likes to add. I like that there's like 3 levels of fertility. Grassland. Sorry. Farmland, grassland, and then grazing land. And then there's also steppe. Most of the bit over here will be steppe. That's where the centaurs are. And then those hills should be... Are those hills? Oh, those are just regular hills. They're not grassy hills. I mean, some of this is grassy hills. Like these I would say are grassy hills. Those probably aren't. These would be. Grassy hills would be like low hills, and the hills would be the higher ones. Let's make those grassy. And these are a bit more windswept. Yeah, that works for me. And then we have these areas of forest in between. I think that too much of this is forested, though. I think I want to turn more of this into grassland. Let's turn this whole forest into grass. Down to here. Sweep around all of this. Then you have this central band, which is going to be annoyingly similar to the small country, but it's a good idea. And then I think I'm also going to put more fertile farmland around these lakes. Or marsh. I think this central part will be marsh, with then farmland around the edges. Or we just leave that farmland. Well, I think that bit up there definitely wants to be marsh. Let's turn this into marsh. Leading down to maybe here. And then they've started to drain this bit out. Yeah, there we go. I like that more. And then more grassland. Into here. Down here. Around here. In those as well. And then we're going to go with regular old hills. Because the ground starts to rise pretty suddenly in here. And then we got some more mountain here. Yeah, I like that more. Starting to look a little bit more natural. And then there's probably some kind of river network through here, which is why that's become so fertile. Grazing land looks more fertile than farmland for some reason. Yeah. Maybe a bit. It works. I know what it means. I don't like that there's so much timber over here either. Let's turn that into... Oh, there's hills with grassland. Hang on. This might be even better. Here. Aha! Blends in a bit too much, but does the job. So you got green hills, which I guess... Yeah, I don't know what green hills are. Green hills could work there, I guess. Do I want to get rid of these forests over on this side? I kind of do. No, I don't. And the reason for that is because the halflings have cut most of these forests. I think they'll probably have cut these ones as well. And then sold the timber. So maybe we'll keep a little bit of a forest down there. And I think I might actually turn this more into... No, this would still be farmland. Yeah, they've cut the forest because they wanted the farmland instead. It's arable. So this is all pretty densely populated. We'll keep a couple of random forests down here with the marsh. Yeah, so uber fertile, pretty fertile, mining and minerals, marsh, marsh, marsh. I feel like I need to make more of this marshy. It's a little bit too nice. So I'm going to turn all of this into one giant marsh. Half the time this is just flooded. However, the bits behind it, pretty fertile. Yeah, I like that. Aren't we getting into human lands now, though? Yeah. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that the humans down here are pretty well off. So there's probably some kind of human-esque realm up there. Maybe we shouldn't have quite so much marshy. Let's keep it a little more coastal. Like that. And I don't like these two random hills. There's no reason for those to be there. Marsh. There we go. Marsh is like Wessex, or Kent. It's drainable. You can definitely drain it. It's just that the halflings have put a concerted effort starting to drain this. There might even be like a dike under construction. No, they couldn't do a dike there because that would cut off trade to the Feywild. I don't like that there is a random ass thing there. I mean, this is marsh. And the reason why that's marsh... Why aren't you clicking? There we go. This would basically be Amsterdam. Or maybe Venice. Probably more Amsterdam, though, which was actually built in a swamp. Are we going to have mermaid-style creatures? Possibly. Hadn't really thought too much about that, though. Okay, so how do I want to play with the south down here? At the moment, this is all jungle, which I don't like at all. So how about we turn the majority of that into grassland? Or forest. We could have a pretty dense forest down here. I'm okay with that. Forest it is. Let's have heavy. Heavy woods in the middle. Coming down to about here. And then light forest around the edges. And then swamp. here. And then grassland in here. I'll probably end up changing this again later, but I just like being able to kind of map out and see exactly how this stuff looks. And I think I might make this all low-lying. I don't really see any reason for this to be forested or jungle. I mean, it could be forested because that's what's keeping this from disappearing into the ocean. I do kind of feel like this should be a bit higher ground, which is why it hasn't swept away. So let's go ahead and put some hills in here. And then I think I might put some actual farmland in here. I think I might add some more hills. Not so many. Can I show you what the full cultivated farmland looks like? Yeah. The reason I haven't done this is because I want to wait until I know where it's actually settled before I do that. Like, this is just supposed to be the geography layer. If we then decide, you know what, we want to have something which is intense. Like, actually, you know what? Yeah, we are going to use it. This is going to be the reclaimed farmland. This is, like, godlike. And that's going to be all of this. Not that bit. We're going to go to regular farm back there. There is another full wheat field. Oh, there. I kind of feel like full wheat field should be more like, yeah, I don't like that. That would be floodplains. Like reeds. Floodplains as opposed to swamp. So maybe like the bit that comes out here would be floodplains. Because this is supposed to be a really big river. You know what? That does make sense. Let's turn this into floodplains. Just that little section there. And this. I'm going to get rid of you. Grasslands. Oops, no, that would be grazing lands. Yeah. I like that more. So, non-half geographical question. Since all humans stem from the genies, how will the human ethnicity work? That's a good question. I mean, humans wouldn't be as widespread in this world. And probably different real world cultures and ethnicities would be the different races, rather. Which is probably explaining why those cultures emerged and evolved. I mean, it's a good question. Like, are there humans outside of this area? Probably not. Humans are the... God, this sounds so bad, but humans are the European. I'm going to stop there. It's the mechanics of this world, not our own. I want to do more with this. I need to fill in here. Those bits are okay. I think these just need to be forest instead of jungle. Nice big forest down here. I think that does make sense. And then these bits should be forested hills, which are down here. And then you're saying that this section down here should be heavy forest, and I can definitely agree to that. That looks pretty decent. So this is definitely a bit of a frontier, like a black forest type area, most likely. And then just outside of that, we are going to put grassland in this central area. And these should be grassland hills. No, you know what? Let's keep that forested. You can have forested coasts. Keep that grassland, that's fine. These can be forested. That can be heavy forested. And then we can have grassland back in here. Boom! Oh, we need to get rid of these. And then let's go with grassy hills. Yeah. Cool. Still need to do this area. I'm going to have the forest go all the way up to the coast and along the coast along here. And then we can have Forest Hill again. That would be you. And then we're going to go grassland again. For all of this. In fact, this bit should be marsh. And then this bit behind is probably actually fairly nice. Let's have... little area of farmland. It's going to be more of an isolated realm, potentially out here. But that works. I do feel like those hills shouldn't be hill. They should be a hill grassy. These should be grasslands, just to keep that theme going. Yeah, that's looking a lot more natural. To me, anyway. And I see another spot for a forest. Right there. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that is the mixed halfling human realm done. There's another little bit over here. I think these would be green. And then more grassland. Grassland. Mix those in. That should be grazing as we get up towards the hills. Just because it's a bit higher up. And then what's this? Kind of feel like I want a forest over here. Let's put a forest there. Yeah. And then grassland. Grazing land. It's a little plateau. Where to next? Probably this. Or we could start working on potential rivers. I mean, at some point I also want to sort out all of this. I think I want to keep a fairly high rise area, mountainous area up there, which I'm thinking is where the goblins come from. This terrain is probably going to be relatively similar to this. So mixed grassland with a little bit of water. I'll probably get rid of some of the random bits of water in there, though. I don't think that really makes a huge amount of sense. In fact, I don't like that all of this is... No. You know what? I'm going to get rid of those watery bits. I don't like that there's a random-ass lake out there. This is all going to be grazing land. And back there as well. Up to here. And then grassland is going to fill in this corridor in the middle. I like that a lot more. Random jungle. Like this. Why are there lakes randomly there? No real reason for them. That looks rather less random. There are still a couple of lakes around, but they're not everywhere. Get rid of those two. And let's turn this into some more grassland. And I also kind of feel like the bit around here should be grazing. So it's not as fertile as these bits on the outside. Like, grassland is perfectly arable. Grazing is like where you would put sheep, so it's some low, soft hills. Then the green hills are where you can actually kind of see that they're hills, and then the hills are like the South Downs. And I like that there are lakes and things down here. That makes more sense. Likewise over there. So the farmland is now more limited, which makes this halfling realm more special. And that's what I wanted to capture with that. Yeah. So there's basically super fertile, pretty fertile, pretty fertile. Or fertile, fertile, pretty fertile. Pretty fertile. And then we would need to give similar treatment to this side. I mean, the marshes are wild and marsh-like. All of the random bits of water in here just don't really make sense to me. So in fact, just so that future Mordred doesn't need to worry about those, I'm just going to fill them in right now. Just gone. Getting rid of these random ass lakes. Keep some of the ones out there. That's fine. I don't like those. No. Don't like them. This one can stay. I like a few of them around, fine. But there were too many. And this is probably going to be rougher and wilder than this. But not by much. And then this is probably going to be more low-lying. We'll need to work out exactly how we want to present that. And then we'll also need to do the same to this. Turn a lot of these random bits into rivers instead of water tiles. What land is steppe? Steppe is like Russian steppe. It's much less arable. It's just like rocky soil. Good for riding. Probably okay for cattle. It'd be probably like Texas, Montana, the steppe. What tile will you use for it? I mean, there's one called steppe. That one. Which is already over here. I know I put some somewhere. Yeah, there, that's steppe. And so's that. Because this used to be water, this used to be an island, but I wanted it to be connected. And I'm still tempted to fill this in. I'm not sure that I necessarily want a body of water there. This will effectively connect into like Eurasia. Equivalent, or thereabouts. GW Smitherman, thank you very much for the 23-month Prime resubscription. Very much appreciate the ongoing support there. I'm sorry I missed that an hour ago. 1 month short. Just 1 month away. Very, very close. Yeah, good. So I think next time we'll start to try and fill this area in. And probably in 2 weeks try to do this. Maybe some more of this. And then at that point we can start thinking a little bit more about the actual simulation going on. I love the fact that there's a dike being built over here. I think that is a really nice touch. This used to be all swampy like this. Kind of more like this territory is what this used to be. And in fact, I kind of feel like I want to make more of this marsh. Let's put a swamp coming in over here. Yeah, that feels better. Looks more like a river delta now. Constantly shifting. It's like the Nile Delta. And this would be... wouldn't really be the Nile, because the Nile's long. I don't know enough about rivers and river settings to say what river this would be like. I gut feeling says it would be a bit more like the Mississippi, but I'm not sure it's going to have a big enough basin for that. Although then again, it's going to be fed by like the entirety of the Feywild, so maybe. Amazon. This is probably more like the Amazon. Mordred, what do you think of an African-themed human civilization, Rome-like maritime, that spread human ethnicities around the world? Around this being the world, sure. Because one thing that we will need to work out, and this is probably going to dictate a fair amount of where things go, is how long ago the cataclysm was. If it was 2,000 years ago, the humans frankly just would not have had time to spread out. If it was 10,000 years ago, then yeah, they would have. But that's one of those timeline things that I don't know yet. I'm still toying with in my mind. Because we need to have enough time for the different races to have evolved. You can't just do that overnight. 10,000 is a good number. 10,000 is what I'm thinking of. So then the surviving enclaves, or at least the emerging enclaves, I should say emerging enclaves, would be like Sumerian type era. Are humans the youngest race? So the way it works is there was the cataclysm. The cataclysm affected a race of effectively genies. Some of the genies who are close to this, the nexus of the cataclysm, which is denoted by these volcanoes, they're not actually there, they're not volcanoes, that's just telling me this is where it happened, become humans. Magic is burned out of them. They can't do it anymore. They can, but they don't do it innately anymore. Then the next ring around that are the elves, where they still have some latent magical energy in their bloodlines, but not as much as the genies used to have. Then you have the gnomes, who are up in the hills. Like, again, these are all the same race of the first. This is just how they evolved over time. Then you have the gnomes, which are up here. A lot of the initial impact they were spared from, which is why they still have quite a lot of latent magical energy, but they had to survive really close to the nexus in the mountains. Mountains shielded them, but it was still a lot of magical energy around them, so they become resistant to it. They can live with it. And then you have the halflings over here, which are a mix of the humans and the gnomes, basically, where they intermarry and interbreed. So probably the youngest would be the halflings. So it would go like humans down here, elves over here, gnomes up here, and then eventually halflings in here. And then probably half-elves wherever the humans and the elves meet. So half-elves would probably be in this kind of region. And then, of course, as maritime travel happens, they'll spread out more. But I just want to have the hotspots of where the cultures are from, and then we can disseminate them from there. As long as I know where they are from, that's the important thing. Magic is a hell of an evolutionary drug. It would definitely accelerate things. For sure. The river looks too straight. Well, remember there's going to be tributaries and stuff coming out of it as well. It will eventually look more like these. And these. And also, I am using a very, very basic tool, which works in lines. I'm limited in what I can do. This is just this is my tool to quickly work out what stuff looks like. Then somebody who is a lot better at making maps, like I'm thinking Tintuna probably, would go and actually make a map out of this, a proper cartography map, rather than hexes, because the end result doesn't need to be hexes. Where did the dwarfs and the orcs come from? The dwarves probably would have been part of the giant genus, but I would say the dwarves are probably already starting to appear in this area. Dragons are much further east, and that's where the Dragonborn come from. They're one of the major invasions. Greenskins would be over here somewhere. I don't know what their precursor is. We haven't got that far, and also they're off the map, so I don't care as much. Those are the main ones. Like the goblinoids would have had to have come from somewhere, and I think the goblinoids would have been the first wave of migrants from the west. And then the dragons come in from the east. And the kobolds come in from the east. And the centaurs come in from the east. And the minotaurs probably from the east, although they might also be from the orcs. Haven't decided. And then we have the turtles down here. And maybe some other races living on these islands before the orcs arrive and knock them out. It's entirely possible. Haven't got to that yet. The Pro, thank you very much for the follow. Welcome to the channel. Orcs come from Cyclops, my headcanon. Possibly. Nagas. Don't really fit in Nagas anywhere. Like, a lot of this is still very much up for discussion and debate. Not everything is set yet. This is half the fun of the world building. Like, a lot of this will emerge organically. I don't need to say exactly, right, these are these, and these, and these, and these, and these, and these. Could be these, and then, this would be a nice space to add these guys in. They appear. Like, the big question I want to answer at some point, and I'm talking months down the line here, is where the hell the hobgoblins come from. I don't want them related to orcs and goblins, although hobgoblins probably should be related to goblins. So maybe the goblinoids come from up here? Possibly. I always kind of envisioned they come from up here, but they wouldn't necessarily need to. The main thing about the goblinoids is I envisioned they would end up down here, but even that they don't necessarily need to do. We could have the hobgoblins based over on this side, with the goblins north of them, and then they attack into the halflings. But then again, I also want the hobgoblins to be like one of the really major powers and then get absolutely obliterated by somebody else coming in. I'm thinking the Dragonborn. So there's a lot of migrations we still need to work into this. But let's work on the people here first, and then work on the migrants. Goblins come from the east of the elves. I mean, it should probably be the goblins, orcs, and hobgoblins would be at least somewhat loosely related. But how exactly that comes about, I don't know. Maybe the goblins destroy the elven homeland. No, because there are high elves and there are wood elves. The wood elves are in here, the high elves are over here. There might have been more high elves at one point, because it kind of makes sense that the ones who are on the fringes of the precursor society would be the ones affected least by the cataclysm. So it could well be that there are some really high populations out here at the start of the simulation, and then somebody comes in and wipes them out. Entirely reasonable. Entirely feasible. Who that is, who knows. To be determined. You had a river. What happened to it? Again, we're flipping between the world before the disasters. This is when the precursors are around. This is post-precursor. When this inland sea gets flooded. It's pretty much the same area you're looking at here. A little bit further north, maybe. See, this is that mountain range. So all of this gets flooded. Bush. What game is this for? No game. Just something I'm doing for fun. Since goblins sailed down rivers and sudden steps, wherein the cataclysm rapidly evolved them to be stronger for the harsh life, and they became hobgoblins. Maybe. I mean, yeah, there should be some kind of relation between them, like how the hobgoblins became smarter. Because the thing that I think really differentiates the hobgoblins from goblins in D&D is hobgoblins are a hell of a lot smarter. There's a reason they're much more organized. There's a reason they're much more technologically savvy. Whether that's to do with the cataclysm, maybe. Whether that's to do with something entirely unrelated, maybe. Because not everything has to originate here. This is just one continent. I like the idea that we have migrations coming in from other areas, because it allows us to flesh out those other areas in the future. We don't have to answer all the questions. Not against wood elves, should we have high elves? I mean, I'm calling them high elves, just, I think D&D calls them sun elves. They're not high elves in Warhammer sense, absolutely not. They're just plains elves, open land elves, river elves. They're probably more river elves. They're just the ones that were on the frontier when the cataclysm happened. The wood elves were the ones that were behind the mountain and stayed in the woods. And then the river elves were the ones that were on this side. That's it. Said you wanted the hobgoblins to be overrun by the dragonborn and the kobolds coming in from the east. True. And we can have multiple waves, so greenskins come in first and then... or goblinoids come in first and then dragonborn. It doesn't even need to be the dragonborn that does it. I just want them moving around. Because the idea that I have behind the hobgoblins is they invaded, they were definitely one of the migrants, like the Huns. They invaded, took over a massive chunk of territory, and then became very complacent. Not in complacent in like a Rome sense, complacent in a Crusader sense. And then they started fighting amongst themselves, and because they started fighting amongst themselves, a secondary invader came in and just completely wiped them out, virtually. Maybe some precursor mystics of some kind use them in experiments to expand the usefulness, awakening a few. Maybe. But again, that's basing it here. I want the hobgoblins to be from somewhere else. I don't want this world to be completely centered around the cataclysm. I want the humans, the elves, and the gnomes, and the halflings to be centered around the cataclysm. Other races don't have to be. It's it's a big event, it's a regional event, but it is localized to this. Which would be one of the reasons why you don't find humans elsewhere. What if the river elves are Dunmer like, blue-skinned? Yeah, possibly. Sounding very much like the goblins, hobgoblins, and Nordic in origin. No. Culturally, they wouldn't be. Like, culturally, I want the hobgoblins to be Germanic. I mean, if we wanted to kind of do that, they would be the ones on the frontiers of the precursor realms. And they would act just like the Germanic hordes did. As soon as the precursor empire falls, hobgoblins come in and take over a lot of their stuff. Might be why the elves over here have a hard time, because the goblinoids come in. I think that's a good idea. Could the hobgoblins be coastal, or they've immigrated, colonized from another place? I mean, I want the colonizers to be the orcs. The orcs come in from the west and take over this area. Because I want the orcs to be maritime. Something appeals to me about just having pirate orcs. And I think that one of the... orcs are a pretty martial culture, but they're adaptable. And I kind of like the idea of having boat orcs. They might use galleys rather than sailing. I mean, they're pretty strong, they can pull oars. And I want them to be raiders. I still want them to be raiders. Caribbean. Not Caribbean culture, but Caribbean style. Don't necessarily mean culturally, but in the formation thing, the goblins were the original raiders, and the hobgoblins were the Normans, because they took over the territory where they were offered it as a buffer or as mercenaries. I mean, actually it's not bad having the hobgoblins have that Norman... That actually makes a lot of sense. So then, physically, the hobgoblins and the goblins are very similar, but culturally, the hobgoblins are different because they've been, quote-unquote, civilized, westernized by the precursor ancestors. Descendants. Precursor descendants. Should probably just call them the descendants. You know, I'm going to write that down. Hobgoblins being kind of like Normans. That's a good idea. Races. Wait, did I save this? Yes, I did. Races. Origins. Hobgoblins. So we have halflings, which we have now decided. Halflings are descendants of gnomes and humans arise in the west of the Shield Mountains. And then hobgoblins, Normans, arrive as invaders, but are given land to settle, and then become more culturally similar to the descendant races. That's a good idea. I do like that. Orcs. Western pirates. Came from Atlantis. So are goblins and orcs related? In this world, probably not. They don't have to be. Are we going goblins and Vikings? No, I don't think so. No, sorry, yeah, goblins, yeah, maybe. Let's actually write that down. Let's go goblins, northern invaders, northwestern part of the continent. Now here's a question, how do they then invade? I mean, this is a problem for future Mordred. But if we're saying that the goblinoids come from up here, well, I guess that makes sense if they sweep through this and then invade over. Once they've conquered the halflings, which is basically securing their food supply, maybe they meet resistance from the humans and jump across over here instead. And then are eventually pushed south by elves coming in and supporting them. Because I do like the idea of the goblinoids coming from here, which would then give credence to the fact that they have the same ancestor as the orcs, they just arrived much earlier. Same ancestors as the orcs, they just arrive much earlier. Discussed earlier an Alexander-like figure for the hobgoblins. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So we would need to have the Norman area that they settle, which would, in map terms, actually make more sense here. Maybe they kick the elves out. So maybe they arrive earlier than I've given them credit for. So the elves are then stuck over here, wanting to regain their homeland, but unable to do so because the hobgoblins keep kicking their arses. Or maybe they just give the hobgoblins like this stretch as the buffer region. That makes more sense. Have the elven homelands along here. I like this idea because we do have this river. This is probably the elven homeland. And then they effectively say that this river is the border. So everything up here is probably hobgoblin. Except that river doesn't exist anymore. It's... actually, does it? Might do. Because that's that. 2211. 211. Yeah, the river comes through here. So there probably is still a river there. Nothing to say the landmass doesn't stretch on the other side of the planet across the pole. True, but would you really see like a classical era civilization being able to cross the poles? Not sure about that. Ice bridge? Actually, now you say it, it did kind of happen. That's how humans got to North America, isn't it? Are our goblins green, kind of like the brown goblinoids in D? Undecided. So then the hobs were hit by the cataclysm? No. After. Much after. Remember, it's the elves they're interacting with, not the precursors. So yeah, I'm thinking the hobgoblins are probably up here. And then either they do a surprise attack going across the sea, or they just conquer this whole stretch. Or, I can't see anyone taking over the Feywild. I think this is probably one of those great unconquered regions. Like, you just can't do it. It's too chaotic. They would have had to have come around this way. And then maybe there is something coming in behind them, forcing the migration. Maybe an ice age. That actually makes a lot of sense. Or a hobgoblin in Alexander the Great, so then you have two realms of hobgoblins. You have the ones up here, and then you have the ones which are somewhere else. We still haven't completely settled on where they are. I don't have much of a problem if they're kind of up here. And that would give them a massive cause for tensions between the hobgoblins and the elves. Could even put them up here. Because nothing has been settled up here yet. This is all free. This is free real estate. Although I really like the idea that the goblinoids come from here. I think that I am going to settle on. So then the hobgoblins kind of push across here. This remains goblin. And the hobgoblins are known as such because they westernized. They met the ancestors. Descendants, damn it. Descendants, not ancestors. Alright, let's make a note of hobgoblins. Either pushed south with an Alexander the Great conquest, or pushed south due to an ice age migration. That would be a mass migration. And I want to have a couple of mass migrations. Mass migrations are awesome because they radically change the face of cultures. Massive mixing pot. You can do loads of stuff with mass migrations. Like, you got the Huns, you got the Vandals, you got the Goths, you got the Mongols. So much stuff changed because of all of that. And the fact that the Goths ended up in Spain still blows my mind. Seeing as they came from, like, Turkey, or north of Turkey. They came from, like, Crimea, down into Italy. Some of them stayed there. Those are the Ostrogoths. Took out Rome. And then the Visigoths, the Western Goths, went out into Iberia. And effectively became the Basques. Not the Basques. Yeah, the Basques. Catalans is the other one I was thinking of. The Basques are basically modern Visigoths, I think. Or Vikings in Northern Africa. It was never in big enough numbers, though. Like, the Goths are numerically important. And the Vandals in Tunisia. Yep, that's another one. Like, those are the kind of migrations I'm talking about here. At some point. This would again be post-Cataclysm, though. Either ventured south or were pushed south. There we go. Anyway, it is way past when I usually stop streaming, so I'm going to call this one here. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, be sure to hit that follow button so you get notifications when I'm live again in the future. It is my plan to continue doing these world-building streams following the end of an Anbanar stream. I think that they work together really, really well. Anbanar, because they've done a fan-flipping-tastic job building their own setting, And that really does inspire me to work on my own. And I think this is coming along leaps and bounds. And thank you, everyone in chat, for your input. It is really invaluable. I love the fact that we can just bounce ideas between us like this in just a really chill manner. Anyway, if you have enjoyed this, hit that follow button. If you've really enjoyed this and you would like to support the channel, then please do check out the Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/MordredViking. I do have a YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/MordredViking, and also a Discord, which you can find at Discord. Link in the chat. I'm just going to go and see who else is live at the moment. I wanted to see if any of my fellow D&D people are live, but no. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and raid Digital Dragons. I know they're not live. I know they're not live because I'm the DM there. But that is the Dungeons & Dragons game that we play on Sunday evenings going into Monday mornings, and that is quite likely where this setting will be used in the future. We're currently playing through Icewind Dale, but if you would like to join us for that, then head on over there. I'll make it nice and easy. Just hit that follow button as soon as you arrive at Digital Dragons GM, and it would be lovely to see you on Sundays. We are playing again this Sunday. Good things are happening. In fact, they're in a really big fortress right now. It's fun. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. I will see you all next time. Head over to Digital Dragons, hit that follow button, and I'll see you for more stuff in the future. Total War Warhammer 3 tomorrow. Embargo is up. Nurgle and Zinch is who are available. Bye, everyone. Flying Cow of Doom. Thank you very much for the follow. Welcome to the channel.